Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. It's 12 o'clock on the dot, so we want to go ahead and get started. My name is Barbara Jimenez. I'm the executive lead for the County of San Diego Independent Redistricting Commission. I will be the facilitator for today's virtual education tour on why redistricting matters in San Diego County, and I'll be handling some of the technical aspects of today's Zoom webinar. If you have any questions during this session, you're welcome to submit a question using the Zoom Q&A function anytime during the meeting. You can find the Q&A button on the bottom center of the main Zoom window. Your questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will be using also closed captioning, the closed captioning feature during this meeting. If you somehow find them distracting or you prefer not to see them, you can adjust your setting by clicking the CC Live Transition Transcript button. It's on the bottom middle of the main Zoom window, and you just select Hide Subtitles. So I'll just give everyone just a few minutes to make any adjustments while we get started. Okay, so I also want to mention that we are recording today's meeting. It'll be available for viewing on our IRC website. Today's session is the first of 5 planned educational sessions, 1 for each district. This one has been designated for District 5, but because all our meetings are virtual, everyone is welcome to attend any session. We are very happy to have you here no matter where you live in the county. Live language interpretation for these meetings are available if requested at least 24 in advance of the meeting. If you'd like to request live translation, you can call us or email our redistricting inbox. Our contact information will be provided during today's presentation. And I'm really excited to get started. So I want to introduce our speakers, both of whom live in District 5. So first I'd like to introduce Co-Vice Chair Rosette Garcia. She's from North County. She's retired, but is an active and engaged community volunteer. She currently serves on the local Planned Parenthood board as a member of the League of Women Voters and as a member of the San Diego Women's Foundation, amongst many other activities. Welcome, Commissioner Garcia. I'd also like to introduce Commissioner Stephanie Brown. She's a retired auditor, having worked over 26 years for the state of California, the Defense Contract Audit Agency for the federal government. She served 6 years on the State of California Board of Equalization's Women Advisory Committee, really focused on developing awareness of diversity in the workplace and the workforce and society as a whole. We thank the commissioners for their time today and for their service on the San Diego County Independent Redistricting Commission. So without further delay, I'll now turn it over to our first speaker today, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Barbara. On behalf of my colleague, Commissioner Garcia, and I would like to welcome you to this educational forum on redistricting in San Diego County. I'd like to point out that since this is an educational event and not a public hearing, we're unable to take any public input today on maps, district boundaries, or communities of interest. We do want your input on those issues, and we will provide information later in our presentation for how you can provide that input. Thanks again for being here. Here is what we will be covering today. First, what is redistricting? Second, who are the Independent Redistricting Commission, or IRC for short, and what do we do? Third, we'll tell you why redistricting matters and why it's important. And finally, we'll tell you how you can participate, because as you will find out, your participation is very important to us. Before we get started, we wanted to launch a quick poll. Excuse me just a moment there. To gauge some of your thoughts and understanding of redistricting. So on a scale of 0 to 4, how much do you know about redistricting? 0 being that you know little or nothing on redistricting, and 4 being that you're an expert at this. So go ahead and make your selection. Just click on the circle next to the number. Okay. Well, it looks like we're about even there. There's about half of you, or most of you said, you know, about middle of the road on redistricting. So we have some folks here who are fairly new at what redistricting is, and some of you are very familiar with that. So hopefully our presentation today can leave you walking away like an expert on the subject. Okay, and our second question, second poll, is on a scale of 0 to 4. How important do you think redistricting is? Again, 0 being not important at all, and 4 being extremely important. I'll give you a few moments to respond to this question as well. Oh, good. It seems many of you answered that redistricting is an important process, and I'm sure that's why you're with us today. So we agree with you fully, and we'll talk more about the redistricting process later, or in the presentation, we'll share with you in greater detail why redistricting is such a vital process to our democracy. So now I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Garcia to share with us what redistricting is.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I'd like to tell our audience today how happy I am to be here today, and to also thank you all for attending. And so, what is redistricting? Let me tell you. Redistricting is the process of redrawing district boundaries for each of our 5 supervisors districts so that each has roughly equivalent populations. Now, we redraw new boundaries every 10 years based on census data. As you know, our federal government conducts a census every 10 years when it counts all individuals residing in the United States at the location where they live. Counting everyone who lives in our county, who lives in our state, and in fact in our whole country is important because our Constitution sets population as the basis for sharing political power. So you might be asking, why do we draw new boundaries? Well, a lot changes in 10 years between those census counts. Think about your own neighborhood and your own communities, and think about the changes that have happened there over the last 10 years. Those kinds of changes are happening all over the county. And as you can imagine, and as you've probably seen, there are new neighborhoods in our county that didn't exist 10 years ago. As a result, communities may grow and populations will increase because babies are born, people move into neighborhoods, or they move from one place in the county to another place in the county. Communities shrink in population because people die or move out of the country or to another part of the county. I'm sorry, they die or move out of the county or to another part of the county. Areas where there were once roughly the same number of people become unequal. And these shifts can affect what a community looks like or who is a part of it. And with those changes can come changes in a community's priorities, interests, and goals. Now you'll see on the slide an illustration of this idea. On the left, you'll see a community with the population equally divided among its districts. Let's imagine that's right after a census count and recent redistricting. Now in the center image, you can see that population changing over time as it experiences the kind of shifts that I just described. And as a result, you can see that these districts are now unbalanced in population. The image on the far right shows how redrawing the boundaries in a process called redistricting addresses those changes so that they are once again equal in population. So we redraw boundaries every 10 years in a process called redistricting so that population is rebalanced to be equal in population, to allow for fair representation. There we go. So I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie, to Commissioner Brown, and she's going to tell us a little bit about who gets to draw those boundaries.
So we've explained what redistricting is and why we redraw boundaries. And now you may be wondering who gets to draw the new district boundaries. Well, the Independent Redistricting Commission, we call ourselves the IRC for short, is responsible for drawing the boundaries for the 5 supervisor districts in San Diego County. We are a commission of 14 citizen volunteers who were selected from an initial pool of nearly 300 applicants. The initial pool was narrowed by the clerk of the Board of Supervisors to the 60 most qualified applicants. A qualified applicant is someone whose experience and education indicate that they possess these traits like analytical skills, the ability to understand and apply state and federal laws, the ability to be impartial, and a knowledge and appreciation for the diversity of the county. So the first 8 members of the commission were randomly selected out of those 60 applicants. A qualified applicant is someone who's experienced, these 8 initial commissioners then reviewed the remaining applications and selected the final 6 commissioners based on the qualifications that I just mentioned. But they also had to consider some other criteria, such as party affiliation, because the commission is required to reflect the political party breakdown of the county, Democrats, Republicans, and no party preference. The commission must also be representative of the county's diversity. So the commissioners also had to consider other factors such as gender, ethnicity, race, and geography. So here is our County of San Diego Independent Redistricting Commission. I'm pleased to say that our commission satisfies all the requirements. We are a pretty diverse crew of 7 women and 7 men, and evenly distributed among the 5 districts. In terms of party affiliation, we closely mirror the county breakdown. We are 6 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 no party preference, who bring wide variety of backgrounds, experiences, and expertise to the commission. The slide here also shows the ethnic breakdown of the commissioners, compared to the county. So it fairly matches. I'm excited to be a part of this worthy project and to be serving alongside these committed citizen volunteers. So now I'll pass it back to Commissioner Garcia to share what makes San Diego County unique in the scene of redistricting.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Yes, San Diego is blazing a trail in redistricting reform. In the last redistricting after the 2010 census count, the Board of Supervisors were responsible for adopting their electoral maps. Historically, in fact, politicians drew the electoral maps that were used in their elections. And this is actually still the case in most of the country. And too often the result is maps that serve political interests rather than the public good, and where gerrymandering is common. We are fortunate in San Diego County to be one of only 4 counties in the state who have placed the responsibility of drawing boundaries in the hands of citizens like our IRC and away from elected officials. In addition to that substantial change, I want to point out that we must also follow strict nonpartisan criteria, which my colleague will cover in just a moment. But we do that in order to ensure that impartiality and fairness are the basis for drawing district boundaries, as well as upholding the ideal of 1 person, 1 vote. These rules will prevent unfair practices such as gerrymandering and should result in fair maps where citizens can elect someone who will represent them. For now, I want to emphasize that we operate as an independent commission. That means we are independent from the influence of elected officials. We are responsible for conducting the redistricting process in an open, transparent manner. And I also want to let you know that we're committed to making it possible for as many broad and diverse voices to be heard and to participate in this process. So here's a list of our duties. We must hold public meetings. In fact, all of our business needs to be conducted publicly. And we do have regularly scheduled IRC meetings twice a month. You can visit our website to get that schedule. We must also conduct public hearings so that we can learn about the community and hear about communities of interest, which we're going to tell you about a little bit later. We will gather public testimony. We will then draw draft maps. And lastly, after we've gone through this very public, hopefully very transparent process, we will adopt the final map that will be used for supervisor elections for the next decade. Again, we are an independent commission of citizen volunteers. We operate completely independently from the influence of the supervisors or any elected official. And we are accountable only to you, the public, and our duties to draw fair and accurate maps for the county. So back to you, Commissioner Brown, to discuss the criteria.
Okay, I'm going to talk now about the criteria that the IRC is required to use to draw new boundaries. The criteria are listed in the order of priority in which they must be applied. The first criterion is that that's already been mentioned. Districts must be of nearly equal population. This rule is required by the US Constitution, and we expect to have roughly 650,000 residents in each of the 5 districts. Next, we must make sure that we create a map that complies with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Third, districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of each district are connected to each other. And fourth, districts must minimize the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. Districts should be geographically compact such that nearby areas of the population are not bypassed for more distant populations. This requirement refers mostly to density and not shape. In addition, the place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate may not be considered in the creation of a map. And districts may not be drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent, political candidate, or political party. The changing map on the right reflects the changes to our county's district boundaries from each of the census years 1991, 2001, and 2011. There are additional criteria that apply only to San Diego County. 3 of the 5 districts have to include unincorporated areas. And 2 of these districts have to be comprised primarily of unincorporated areas. So as a point of reference, the County of San Diego includes 18 unincorporated cities, mostly on the western part of the county along the ocean there, as you can see on the map. But much of the county is unincorporated territory out in the desert and high areas. Much of the county is in unincorporated territory, land outside the boundaries of those 18 incorporated cities. On this slide, you'll notice the vast diversity of land that District 5 encompasses. District 5 covers the northernmost area of San Diego County. It stretches from the oceanside coast to the Palomar Mountain Range, through many tribal lands, and beyond to the Anza Borrego Desert. The district is nearly 1,800 square miles, and it's a vast resource of nature, industry, universities, resorts, golf courses, restaurants, agriculture, and even a theme park. So now I'll pass it back to Commissioner Garcia to share with us all why redistricting matters.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Yes, so why does redistricting matter? Well, first, I'd like to say that redistricting matters because how maps are drawn and how communities and neighborhoods get grouped together or separated can affect whose voices are heard on election day. Redistricting done properly and fairly ensures that communities can elect a representative of their choice. But from the point of view of redistricting at the county level, and that's what we're here to talk about, San Diego County redistricting, it's worth mentioning that our county Board of Supervisors, the elected officials, they operate a budget of over $6.5 billion. Yes, $1 billion. The county is a responsible agency for providing, among other things, public health, like all the services around the COVID-19 response, including the distribution of vaccines, election services, voter registration, roads, parks, libraries, law enforcement, jails, social services like CalFresh and Medi-Cal. It's a long list, and I haven't even covered it all there. But the important point here is that no matter where you live in the county, whether you live in an incorporated city or in one of the unincorporated areas of the county, and I know sometimes this gets confusing, but here's what you need to remember. The decisions made by our supervisors about how the county budget gets allocated, what resources get funded and which ones don't, how the money gets spent, it will affect you. It will have an impact on your life. So it's important that you and your community have a fair chance to elect a supervisor who will represent you. So how does redistricting affect a community's ability to elect a representative of their choice? I have a slide that illustrates this point. You can see two diagrams of the same population that are popping up here. In each, they've been divided into 4 equal districts. But let's take a look at the image on the top first. You can see a map where there's a minority population, which makes up 25% of this entire population. And the way the lines have been drawn in this map, that minority population has been separated and effectively silenced. It's not likely that their voices, their interests, their priorities are going to be heard in an election. Their voices are going to be basically outnumbered by the majority. And so they're not likely to have a fair shot at electing someone who will represent them. In the bottom image, you see an alternative scheme, one that keeps this minority population largely intact so that they are now a majority of the population in one district, empowering them to have their voices heard. It's arguably a fairer map where one of the 4 districts is majority minority, which accurately reflects the population. 1 out of 4 residents is a member of that minority. If the majority minority district can be drawn, the Voting Rights Act requires it. So redistricting can keep people with common interests, identity, language, and history bundled together so they can effectively advocate for themselves and make their voices heard in local affairs, or it can gerrymander them and silence their voices. Gerrymandering, as you may know, is the practice of deliberately dividing or arranging election districts in a way that gives one political party an unfair advantage in elections. Independent redistricting commissions, like the one in San Diego County, like our IRC, provide a safeguard against gerrymandering and help promote drawing of fair maps where people can elect representatives of their choice. So now I'm going to pass it back to Commissioner Brown to talk a little bit about how we'll know how to draw those new boundaries.
Okay. We've talked about what redistricting is and who is responsible for redistricting and what criteria is used in redistricting. But what about the data? How will the IRC know what changes in the population have taken place so that they can draw new boundaries? Well, first, we'll get the population count by getting the census data that was taken for the 2020 census count. And that's going to come to us in a variety of ways. Secondly, we'll use public input, information that we gather from you to help us learn about and understand your communities of interest. So now let's talk a little bit about what a community of interest is. A community of interest, or COI for short, is a population that shares a common social or economic interest that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Communities of interest are not defined by their relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. Again, a COI is one that shares common social and economic interests. A COI might coalesce around the fact that it shares a common culture or a common language, but there are many other ways to define a COI. An example of a COI might be a neighborhood that's adjacent to a shipping port, because that community shares common interests pertaining to dealing with the impacts or effects of having a shipping port as a neighbor. A critical source of information may be the most critical source, and maybe the most critical source about COIs will necessarily come from the public, from people telling us about their COI. The census data will give us some information about the neighborhoods and the communities, but it won't necessarily tell us about your issues and concerns that bring your community together. So how do you know if you belong to a COI? Well, does your neighborhood share certain celebrations or traditions, like street fairs or street festivals and parades? Are there important places where your community gathers, like in parks or community centers? What is the history of how your community came together? Other questions you may ask are are you a part of the community who has issues that have not been adequately addressed by your elected representatives? Has your community come together to advocate for important services, better schools, roads, or health centers in your neighborhood? I'm in the neighborhood of Valley Center, and we recently found out that they're considering adding a senior center and a youth center there, additional youth center. And this is because of the community of interest speaking up to their representative. So it works. Have you worked for more recognition or support of your community, like having holidays recognized or historical events commemorated? These are all kinds of factors or interests that might help you identify your community of interest. I want to remind you today that we cannot take information about communities of interest. We will do those during public hearings over the summer. So be prepared to join us in our public hearings when we make the announcement for those. This here today is just an educational session for you to learn about redistricting. But there are many ways, and we will offer the public many opportunities to tell us about their communities of interest. And we'll be sure to provide you that information. Okay, we'll be conducting a minimum of 7 public hearings starting in mid-summer. These hearings are intended to give the residents of San Diego County the opportunity to participate in the redistricting process by providing us public input on their communities of interest. But you do not need to attend one of these hearings to be able to provide your input. You can provide oral testimony at a public hearing. You can submit a written testimony via email or snail mail. you can draw a map, and we will have an electronic tool on our website shortly, and you can play around with that and see if that's a map that you can use to identify your community of interest. Or you can simply take a paper map of the county, draw a circle around the area of your community of interest. But it's important that you tell us about the characteristics of that community and the issues that bind you together and why you shouldn't be separated. Because then that'll give us a better idea of which communities we should keep intact. There's a lot that needs to be accomplished during the redistricting process. Commissioner Garcia will share with you a bit about the redistricting timeline.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, you'll see on the slide a timeline that shows the activities and the timing that the IRC is planning from now until the final map is adopted. This timeline begins in June, although we got started and had been busy since last fall. But you'll see that we are currently in the education tour phase, which are events like the one that you're at right now. And we will be doing more of those between now and early to mid-July. In mid-July, we expect to begin the public hearings, which Stephanie was just talking about, where we will be learning about and gathering as much information as we can about the communities of interest that exist throughout the county. We need to get this information. Without it, we might inadvertently separate a community because we don't know about it. So we'll be doing those public hearings. In mid to late August, we expect the US Census Bureau to finally release raw data to the state. That data has to be processed by the state of California, after which they will release the official redistricting database. It's called the statewide database. They will release it to us, and we're expecting it sometime around mid to late September. Shortly after that, in early to mid-October, we will begin drawing draft maps. We cannot do that until we have the official statewide database information. Each draft map will be published and made available for public comment. And we will also be holding at least 2 public hearings during this map drawing phase, the draft map drawing phase, so that we can hear from the public about the proposed new boundaries. Our current deadline to adopt a final map for the county is December 15th. Please remember, this is a tentative timeline, as the slide title says, and it's based on current information, and all the dates, including the final map adoption deadline, are subject to change. So I'd like to take a minute to talk about why this timeline is tentative and why all the dates are subject to change. It's very unusual. You may have heard that the census data has been delayed. Well, that rumor is true. In fact, it has been significantly delayed, affected by a number of things, not least of them the COVID-19 pandemic. So typically the census data would have arrived by the spring, and we would be already nearing the end of the redistricting process and adopting a map by August. Instead, we're still waiting for the census data. And like I said, that's not even expected till mid-August. The initial delay from the Census Bureau resulted in an extension of the map adoption deadline to December 15th, the one that I just told you about. But we've actually experienced further delays, and we don't know if the map adoption deadline will be extended further. So you'll need to stay tuned. But what I can tell you is that our priority is to ensure that the public has ample opportunity to participate in the redistricting process. We want to protect the time that is supposed to be available to the public to participate and to give us the input that they'd like to give us. And we also want to make sure that we have the time we need to gather all the information that we need to draw fair and accurate maps. I'd like to say that delays are not usually desirable, but we're trying to look at the positive side of this delay And we're thinking about this as a bonus. It's additional time for us to dig deep and learn as much as we can about the county, its diverse communities, and especially about communities of interest. And I think it's a bonus for the public as well, because it gives you more time, extra time, to work together to think about whether or not you belong to a community of interest, and to come together and advocate for yourselves. So we're almost done. I'd like to end with a story. It's a specific example of a community here in San Diego County where public input made a difference. And it happened in Barrio Logan. Prior to the last redistricting cycle in 2010, the Barrio Logan community had been split into 2 county supervisors districts. A portion of it was in District 1, and another portion of Barrio Logan was in District 4. So imagine that, and think back to the slide that showed the image of a community that had split up. And you can imagine that a community split in half, is less effective and has less power to advocate for themselves. And that's what had happened to Barrio Logan. So during the 2010 redistricting process, the county heard from that community. They spoke up and they told the county that they had been separated, and they asked to be unified in one supervisor's district. So when the map was redrawn, the community of Barrio Logan was in fact restored and assigned wholly to District 1. And I believe that this might not have happened had the Barrio Logan community not spoken up. So just want to emphasize, we really value your input, and we need your input, and we want your input. So back to Commissioner Brown to wrap it up.
Okay. As promised at the beginning of this meeting, here are ways for the public to participate in the San Diego County redistricting process. You can attend our meetings, the regularly scheduled IRC meetings, the public hearings, and offer public comment there. Currently, our meetings are held virtually on Zoom, like the rest of the world, and they are all open to the public. All meetings, public hearings, etc., will be published on our website, so you can visit our website to get that information. You can spread the word to others to attend another one of these events. There are several more scheduled in the next month or so. Another one of these educational sessions. We'll show you a list of those at the end of the presentation. You can go to our website and click on Invite a Commissioner to Speak button and make your request. If you belong to a group of people representing a big portion of your area or community of interest, we'd be more than glad to come and speak directly to you. Even if you don't attend a meeting, a presentation, or a hearing, you can always submit your comments via email or regular mail. The address is up on the slide. Finally, to stay informed about what is happening, you should subscribe to our email list to receive information about meetings, hearings, and other information about our redistricting process. You can subscribe to our email list. You go in, like if you wanted to subscribe to the COVID information most recently, if you've done that, go into the same area and click on redistricting information, and they'll send you an email when something's coming up with whatever that meeting is going to be about. So pretty soon, like I mentioned before, we'll have a tool available on our website that will allow you to draw a map describing what your community of interest is. So keep checking the website for that. Now, this concludes our presentation for today, but Commissioner Garcia and I want to make sure you leave today's presentation with these few takeaways. First, redistricting only happens once every 10 years. So residents of San Diego County have a once-in-a-decade opportunity right now to engage in the redistricting process. That redistricting process will affect all elections between now and the next census. So don't miss your chance to help us draw the maps that will be being used for the next decade. Commissioner Garcia, what else would you like our audience to take away from today's presentation?
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Yes, we want you to know that we are committed to drawing fair and accurate maps for our 5 supervisors districts. We want to ensure that you have a fair chance to elect a supervisor who represents you. And we are also committed to making it possible to hear from as broad and diverse a population as possible. We would, and we are thinking and planning about how to reach all corners of the county. I hope we made it clear that we need your input. We cannot do this work without your input, and please help us do the best job we can for you. Thank you again for joining us, and I think we're going to end with a slide that has all of our contact information. And I'm not sure what other slides we have, but we're done with the presentation. I think we can move on to the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for doing such a superb job on illustrating the different complexities of this entire process. And like you mentioned, it's once in a decade, so this is a great opportunity. And we did get a number of questions and answers. So I'm bringing those up now because this is the exciting part, to be able to answer these questions. I think I do want to note that some of the questions were answered, but a great one to read out loud is just around, is there an opportunity, or is this PowerPoint available so that people can review it again? And so we want to remind folks, you just finished on the slides and the recording of the educational tour being posted on our redistricting website. And we want to make sure that everyone knows that the commissioners, the Independent Redistricting Commission, really value and ensure that updated information is on the website. I have a question for both of you. Sort of what is it that, why did you volunteer to serve on the IRC? If you could share that, we have that question come in, and I think that's an important one.
Okay, I'll start. Well, my whole life I spent in public service. So, I mean, I was elected to every government spot that there was all the way through my school years. And then when I graduated from college with an accounting degree, I went to work for the state of California as an auditor and retired with them after 26 years. And then spent a little time with my son for a few years there. He was still young with me. But after that, I decided I wanted to go back to work. So I went to the federal government and became an auditor with the Defense Contractors Audit Agency, which was completely different than sales tax auditing, but very, very interesting. So I'm no longer with them. And I thought, okay, well, the county is looking for someone and I haven't worked for the county yet. So, and actually this is a volunteer position. So that I thought it would be pretty good to be able to give back to the community by giving my time and skills to be able to hopefully draw some very fair maps for all of us. And that's what led me to file the application.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, so that's a great question. I've always been, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've always been sort of active in my community, and I've done a lot of, and I've also just been interested in sort of public affairs kind of things. I've done things like registered voters. I've worked the polls for the registrar of voters on election day. And I had followed the redistricting in the state of California, and I was really pleased back, more than a decade ago when the state of California went to an independent redistricting commission. So when I saw that our county was doing it, I said, yeah, I'd like to give it a try. And I was really excited and honored to have been selected. I think this is really important. for all of us. And I'm just really delighted to be able to participate and hopefully deliver fair maps for the county.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. So another question, did the applicant have to be a party member for any specific amount of time? Some individuals switch around periodically.
If I see the name of that person, and I think I know her. So if that's who I think it is, hi. And Barbara, the answer to that question is yes. You had to have been a member, whatever your, however you were registered. There was a minimum number of years, and I want to say it was like for the last 2 elections. It had to have been for 2 election cycles. But Barbara, I'm sure you have that information.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Brown.
No, that's it. I can't remember exactly, but.
Sure. So the elections code does indicate you needed to be a voter who has been continuously registered in the county of San Diego with the same political party preference or with no political party preference, who has not changed the voter's political party preference for 5 or more years immediately preceding the date of the voter's appointment to the commission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, very good.
So here's another question. And I think this is a really important one because I want to make sure we allow enough time for the last polls. But when we look at opportunities for, and this is a perfect example, this education tour. So the question is, how are you increasing awareness of redistricting to increase public awareness, participation, and engagement? So I'll open up that question to both of you.
I think I'm going to defer to Rosette because she is on our ad hoc committee for selecting an outreach company.
So yeah, that's an excellent question. And one thing I'd like to say first is that if anybody here at this meeting, any of our audience members has any ideas about how we can improve our visibility, how we can do a better job of outreach, we'd love to hear that. That's one of the things that we're we're looking for, especially from communities of interest. We need to know, what is the best way to reach you? Where do you gather? Where can we hold a meeting that will be convenient for certain groups? But in terms of what we're doing educational events like these, and we are advertising them as broadly as we can. The county, we use a county distribution list, and they have an exhaustive set of mailing lists. So hopefully we're reaching a lot of people that way. So like I said, we're doing a number of these events. Right now, everything that we're doing is virtual. And on the one hand, that's very convenient for many, many, many people, but we also recognize that internet access and laptops and computers and all of that can create, it is an obstacle for some people. So we are thinking about that, and we are looking for creative and innovative ways to reach people everywhere in the county where they are. And so anyway, we're doing press releases, we're, internet, Facebook, Nextdoor, paper. We're trying all the ways that we can, but we're open to ideas and suggestions.
Great.
Another thing we do with that is there are other commissions in the state, as well as one that's for statewide, and they all set up the way that they do things internally, but they all have different ideas. So we have tried to contact several of those to get other ideas that might be very conducive for our committee, our commission. And then we pick and choose. But like what Rosette was saying, that we get most of our input from the public. So by all means, please If you don't have a suggestion, that's okay. If you know somebody else who's given you a suggestion when you're talking with them about having attended this presentation, then by all means, have them tell them how to contact us, because our ears are open.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Brown, and thank you, Commissioner Garcia. So there's another question that came in, and this is about the data. So if the official data is delayed, how much of the process can be completed prior to receiving the official data to complete the process of drawing the maps?
That's a good question too.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
please, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that's exactly what's happening, and the problem that we've encountered, and the way that we're handling it is we're trying to get as much information ahead of the actual data that normally we may have not gotten until after that data came in, so that we have it ready to go when the data comes. We're going to have the program set up so that we can spread out the population spread out the population as evenly as possible, and then we'll have information from the communities of interest also that we've just been gleaning by giving these presentations, by doing public hearings and getting information that way. So hopefully we'll have everything at our fingertips when we sit down to draw our draft. Whereas maybe without this situation, we would have been probably maybe drawing a draft earlier and then going out and finding the data that might alter that draft. So it's just a little reversed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm looking at the clock, and so we only have about 8 minutes left. And there's lots of questions, so we're going to make sure to, respond to the questions. I think these are, lots of great questions, and we want to make sure we can get responses. But I also wanted to open up the poll. As you mentioned, Commissioner, at the beginning, we wanted to get an idea, knowledge of redistricting. So we have the poll that's come up. So now that you've heard this wonderful presentation, on a scale from 0 to 4, how much do you know about redistricting? So if you can answer the poll, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm just waiting for the results.
Great.
Oh, yay! This is great. This is absolutely great. Thank you. We're really happy to see that many of you are familiar with the redistricting. And we really appreciate all of you that attended. And we want to make sure that you also are aware that on our website, we have a redistricting training continuum. And again, as the commissioners mentioned, please contact us via email, mail, or phone for any questions you may still have. And then I think we have one final poll, and this is the importance of redistricting. So we'll bring that poll up. That is up. How important do you think redistricting is? And we had a high one on this one, so hopefully it's continuing in the right direction. So we'll see here. Let's see here.
And while we're waiting for that, if any audience members have feedback for us about what they would have liked to have heard more about, or whether a part of our presentation was not clear enough, or you needed, to be cleared up, we'd love to get that feedback as well, because we still have 4 more of these to do, and if we can improve this presentation, we'd certainly like to do that.
Yes, and I want to thank, we did, oh, look at that, 80%. Awesome. That's very neat. Thank you very much. And we really appreciate all of the attendees. And thank you for providing your responses to the questions, and your feedback is really important to us, as the commissioner mentioned. I did see a couple of comments around appreciation for the PowerPoint. So we want to make sure that that we acknowledge that, and that it's made made available. So I think we have one more slide. It might be the last slide as we're wrapping up here. Yes. And it was mentioned earlier today that we have the commissioners are doing these district specific virtual education tours. This was the first one. And we have the next one coming up on June 8th, and that is District 4. And we're doing an evening one, 6 to 7. District 1 is on June 16th, 4 to 5 p.m. And then District 3 and District 2. Please RSVP on our website. And again, feedback, we appreciate all the feedback. We also want to remind folks that live language interpretation for these meetings is available if requested at least 24 hours in advance. Please give us a call or email our redistricting email. And I want to go ahead and just thank Commissioners Garcia and Brown for sharing this informative presentation with us. Thank all of the attendees for taking the time to join us today. And I will just ask Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Garcia, any last thoughts before we wrap up right on time?
No, I just want to repeat your thank yous to everybody for attending. We appreciate your interest in your communities. So that's the way to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll end on a very positive note from one of our attendees that said this was an excellent presentation. It provided so much information in a great format with proper charts and slides. And thank you too for not dumbing it down. So we'll end on that positive note.
Stay in touch. Stay in touch.
Thank you, commissioners. Everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Barbara.